What stories are bringing you comfort right now? Reading, scripted, personal stories, whatever. What stories are you hearing or sharing that are moving you through whatever grief, fear, or anger you're experiencing? Obviously, you're not surprised to hear that fairy tales and folklore are my go tos. When cracking open a new fairy tale book, I get to have my cake and eat it too. I reread a safe and familiar tale, but I get a fresh point of view, or I see it set in a new world, or maybe I get the thrill of reading something more obscure, and my world is opened a little more than it was before I opened my book. Assuming most of the people seeing this are my current followers, you may have a similar experience with fairy tales. For didn't we find each other in the beginning of another era of grief, fear, and anger? Sure, the isolation of the early COVID pandemic made it easy for me to go viral with a saucy story. We were desperate to connect to each other, desperate for new faces to disrupt the monotony. But the need to connect through stories, and through folktales in particular, is as ancient as the stories I share here. While the Black Plague ravaged 14th century Europe, Giovanni Boccaccio wrote the Decameron. Later, Italian writers Giovanni Francesco Straparola and Giambattista Basile wrote what are regarded as the first literary collections of fairy tales as the Venetian Ottoman Wars ransacked their homeland. We turn to fairy tales in times of unrest. Sometimes it's moments of personal conflict. The French conteuses of the 17th century used fairy tales to speak out against the patriarchal nature of their French society. And around the same time, Charles Perrault wrote his most famous fairy tales after being sacked from the court of Louis XIV. But political and social upheaval really bring out the best in fairy tales. The Brothers Grimm created their famous collection while Napoleon chipped away at the Germanic states. Carmen Lyra recorded Costa Rican folktales in 1919, at the same time she was organizing rebellions against her country's dictatorship. Zora Neale Hurston wrote the first definitive anthology of Black American folklore smack dab in the middle of Jim Crow. Fairy tales and folktales proliferate in times of stress and conflict, and humanity has rarely experienced a time without that. So are fairy tales going to save the day right now? No, but they have stood the test of time through a millennium of turmoil and tragedy for communities all around the world. Fairy tales and folk tales are essential to finding community, and I feel lucky to have that community in you. So I'll keep telling these stories here in hopes they'll bring you some comfort. Of course, if the here you're enjoying them on is TikTok, you might need to find me elsewhere, as that app might be on its way out right around the same time as the Biden administration. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.